Hi, I am looking at the question posed by Kathy on the message board, and I'm going to try to help you through it over here. First of all, here was the question. The question was, let me use a little bit thicker. Okay, so sorry, this is the question that you have over here. 3x squared minus 2x equals 8, and you said that you factored it into 3 times x minus 4 times x plus 2. Problem with that is it doesn't really factor because on the left side there are only two terms, so you wouldn't be able to factor. The only thing you'd be able to factor out of the left side would be an x. So if you would factor anything, you could factor, let's say, 3 times, well, there's not even a 3 in this term over here. So really, at this point, you wouldn't want to factor anything. What you'd want to do is set the entire term equal to 0, and then you could factor out of the entire thing. Now, at this point, there's only two terms to the left of the equal sign, and there's a term to the right of the equal sign, but you can set the whole thing equal to 0 by taking an 8 out of each side. If we do that, then we've got 3x squared minus 2x minus 8 equals 0. Once we're over here, now we can do a factoring job. Not by factoring anything out of all three terms. There's really nothing that you could factor out of all three terms. You know, a 3 doesn't factor into a 2 or an 8. An x, there's no x term over here. So what you'd really have to try to do is to try to establish it as two polynomials, or two binomials over here. Instead of using x and x, which is what we normally use because that multiplies up to x squared, you'd use 3x and x because those are the two terms that would multiply up to 3x squared. You'd need that 3 to come from somewhere. And then you'd have to look at two terms that would multiply up to the negative 8 and would add up to the negative 2 with the 1 over here counting 3 times. Because remember, when you FOIL it back, you're going to have this times this, and then this times this, and then this times this, and then this times this, when you FOIL it back. So whatever's over here, whatever's on the outside, is going to be multiplied by 3x rather than x. So we have to figure out, counting whatever's over here 3 times to get the result in the middle, what two terms are going to give you negative 8 and are going to add up to negative 2 with this being counted 3 times. Now, of course, the roots of 8 are very simple. It's either 8 and 1 or 4 and 2. There's just no other possibility. So we have to do a little trial and error. And if you do 8 and 1, well, if you put an 8 over here, well, that would be 8 times 3 is 24. That would be too much. If you put an 8 over here, let's say we try an 8 over here and a 1 over here, that really wouldn't work because this 1 would be counted 3 times, and then you'd have an 8 and a 1. Either way, you're not going to, 8 and a 3, either way, you're not going to get up to negative 2. So just using trial and error, I think the only way to do it is the 4 and the 2. Now, obviously, one has to be negative, one has to be positive, because they have to multiply up to negative 8. So we can look at the various possibilities, and counting whatever's over here 3 times, just thinking about it, I can say, what if we use a positive 4 and a negative 2? If we use a positive 4 and a negative 2, and we count the negative 2 3 times, so that negative 2 is actually going to be a negative 6, and that I think is going to work. So for example, if we used this as a positive 4 and used this as a negative 2, that's going to work. And the reason why that's going to work is they're going to multiply up to a negative 8, because 4 times negative 2 is negative 8. And they're also going to add up to a negative 2, because negative 2 times 3, the negative 2 counts 3 times, is negative 6, and the positive 4 adds up to negative 2 altogether. Now you've factored into two binomials. Now you can just go ahead and set the two sides equal to 0. 3x plus 4 equals 0. Each side equals 0, so x minus 2 also equals 0. So on this side, you can subtract 4 from each side to take that, just like you would any other equation. 3x equals negative 4, so divide each side by 3, and x is negative 4/3, or negative 1 1/3. On this side, just add 2 to each side, and you have x equals 2. So your two answers are negative 4/3 and negative 2. If we multiplied it out and made sure it works by checking it, well, the two values, the easy one. If we wanted to check it using the 2 value, you'd have 3 times 2 squared minus 2 times 2 equals 8. Well, 2 times 2 is 4, times 3 is 12, minus 2 times 2, which is 4, equals 8, which of course is correct. The other one is a little bit more complex, but, let's do it out. Why not? 3 times negative 4/3 squared minus 2 times negative 4/3 equals 8. Okay, well, negative 4/3 squared, to square one of these things, you got to square both sides. So it becomes a positive, of course, because a negative times a negative is a positive. 4 times 4 is 16 over 3 times 3, which is 9, minus 2 times negative 4/3. So a negative times negative is a positive. 2 times 4 is 8, so this becomes 8/3 equals 8. Let's see if that works. Well, this gets canceled with this. The 3 and the 9 becomes this. Well, 16/3 plus 8/3, which is 24/3, equals 8, and of course that is correct. 24/3 is 8, and we know that we have the correct answer. Hopefully this helps, and thank you for watching.